Now, main event. Want to welcome up Sam Moffett of Local Pastures and Michael Vaclav of Medici Roasting, two local business owners who are now accepting Bitcoin, thankful to Square's launch. So I'm going to lead a discussion with them. I'm going to start off the discussion, but then we're going to have mics, and I would love for everybody to be able to answer questions for these guys. So, Sam, why don't you grab the seat? I'll sit in the middle. And then also, for those of you guys who do not know me, my name is Parker Lewis. I work out of here at the Commons, help organize events informally. Jack Lesser is the guy running the show now, but try to help out as I can. And I'm very thankful to these two gentlemen, not only for leaning into Bitcoin, but also for being here tonight to share about their businesses. To start, I want to just turn it to each of you guys and to introduce yourselves. I heard a story on Marty's podcast about how you got into farming. So Sam, owner of Shirtel Creek Farm, as well as owner-operator in a partnership with Bellevue Farm of Local Pastures. How'd you get into the farm business, and then how'd you get into being a local grocer? So if you could give a little bit of backstory on yourself, but then talk a little bit about your businesses.
Yeah. Well, you know, I worked in digital advertising for about 15 years. So I went to UT here and got involved with a startup and did that for many years. And then went and started my own business and had no passion for this business, but you know, it was lucrative. And so that's the wave I was riding. Fast forward to, you know, 35 years old, had our kids, and my wife and I would fantasize about one day living on a farm with our kids. I don't know. It was just a fantasy. It was just this idea we had. It sounded great. And so we had two kids. We took them to Callahan's over on 183 one weekend. We lived in Austin for 20 years. And to see the goats and the chicks that they have over there. And my wife looked at me when we got in the car afterwards and said, you know, I think I'd be ready to go ahead and move to the country. And immediately I got on Zillow and found 5 or 6 listings. And, you know, I don't hesitate. Man of action, I like to say. And so we bought the farm, the only one we went and looked at. And my ad business started kind of softening. We were really annoying. So I made a living annoying the crap out of people. I put these autoplay video players on Pandora and many mobile apps, and many of you probably punched me in the face before I leave here tonight for that. But we did that, and Chrome and Firefox didn't like those players any more than any of you probably did, and so effectively rolled out new versions of their browser software that didn't allow our players to play anymore. And for a while we could work around that, but ultimately we you know, our business was tanking, and I either needed to revitalize this business I had no passion for, or do something else. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there with my wife looking at all this land we bought, and I got this crazy idea that I could farm. And so like a good little dreamer, I started building out proformas and researching, like, how much feed does a hen eat per day, and how many eggs do the hens lay, and what kinds of things kill hens. And I thought I had it all figured out. And so I went to my wife one day and I said, "Babe, I bought 1,500 chickens. They're coming in 2 weeks." And she proceeded to have a panic attack, which is not uncommon for her, given that she married me, you know. But yeah, so fast forward to today, we are fully functional regenerative farm. We own 115 acres out in Brenham, Texas. We lease another 300 or so, and we produce 100% grass-fed and finished beef, and pasture-raised eggs, chicken, and pork. And we would go to the farmers markets in downtown Austin every weekend. Our neighbor was Aubrey and Perrin from Bellevue Farm, and we got to know them very well. And one of the biggest barriers for direct marketed farm business, where you're selling your product to consumers, is making it easy for consumers to transact with you. And we found that those 4 hours every weekend at the farmers market were really effective, but there wasn't enough of it. And I was wholesaling a lot of product and making no money. In fact, the first year that we broke $1 million in sales, we showed a $5,000 net profit. My wife and I took no salary that year, and we got one of those PPP loans. That was the only reason we were positive. So I had to come to Jesus with myself. I was like, what the hell are you doing, man? This is crazy. And Belvie and us started putting plans together to open a farm stand. We thought it'd be cool to just do the farmer's market thing, but have it live all the time. And we did, and Austin responded, and it did well. And a little over a year ago, we opened our second location in North Lamar. It's called Local Pastures. So that's, in a nutshell, what kind of the evolution was for us. And we're still learning and figuring that out along the way. But
Yeah, and I used to live downtown, and I'd go grab Shirtel eggs on Saturday at the downtown farmers market, and as most Bitcoiners do, they're always asking people, "Hey, will you accept Bitcoin as payment?" And so I knew the Shirtel brand and the Shirtel eggs long before I had met Sam. But if anybody hasn't had the Shirtel eggs or the Shirtel beef, like, you got to go to Local Pastures or find them on at the farmers market. Are you guys still at the downtown farmers market on Saturdays?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael, can you introduce yourself? So also, I was born and raised in Austin. I knew the Medici brand because you founded it with your wife in 2006. Is that correct? So almost 20 years. And we got a chance to meet at the Sapien Center, I think summer of last year in 2024. And we talked about a lot of things, but including Bitcoin payments. And I was like, well, you really got to wait till Square launches. But before we get into the Bitcoin side, just talk a little bit about your roasting business, the footprint in Austin, how you got into it, because it's more than just a coffee shop. So just talk a little bit about your background, founding that business, and just the passion that you guys have for what you do.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm kind of like that sort of cliche coffee guy, like growing up, smoking cigarettes, playing chess, and talking about like deep things. Like that's what my brother and I did. So I've always loved coffee shops. It's like a lot of it's for the community. It's like where you meet people, you get to ask questions, and everyone's so different. It's been really fun to see just, I'll give you an example. Metro Espresso Bar is where I hung out in college. And I would meet everyone from like a Satanist to a Mormon to a Christian to a Muslim, and then an Ayn Randian. And it's like all across the board. And I love asking questions. And I have to be careful sometimes because like if I ask too many questions, sometimes people get frustrated with me. But that was really fun for me. And that's kind of I've always felt with coffee shops is like a really great community place that you can be and just really get down to like the dirty of life and stuff. And But I got into coffee in 2003. I worked for TDCJ. I was an internal auditor. I went to like 40 prisons and audited prisons, and absolutely fascinating. It's a whole other subject. But they had budget cuts, and my wife was like, well, why don't you go work at a coffee shop and get some experience? So I worked at JP's Java, which is kind of like JP's and Teo's, I'd say it was kind of like the beginning of the specialty coffee movement in the South. There's kind of some remnants. It was really fortunate for us. We had a the U.S. Barista champion came in and trained us at JP's Java, so we kind of were getting some of that. I mean, a lot of stuff that we were trained back then that was cutting edge is like totally not cutting edge now. It's like you don't do that, but at the time it was like, whoa, this is amazing, and it's not now. But it kind of started that movement of specialty coffee, and so when my wife and I opened up Medici in 2006, it's like we took a lot of that and just started running with it. And it's really beautiful to see like how coffee has grown in Austin. Again, there's a lot of great shops. I'd say like, but the specialty kind of movement with Medici, and then Once Over opened in 2008, and then my manager opened up Houndstooth, and then from about 2010 to 2015, that whole specialty coffee movement. It's like where before I'd be like, oh, you can go here or maybe there. Now it's like, where do you live? Okay, here's 2 places in the spot that you live. There's really great coffee all over Austin right now. But the short of it is we opened in 2006, had 2 kids, opened a shop, had a kid, opened a shop, had a kid, and just kind of like, that's kind of been our journey through this whole thing. And always have loved coffee, love creating spaces. Like, I think that's one thing that I've learned is like, it's not necessarily coffee that I love. It's like I love creating spaces for people, and coffee is sort of like the canvas I get to paint with or the paint on and stuff. And so that's been really fun to learn. Because I mean, I really love and am passionate about coffee, but I think that was something I learned like later on. It's like, oh, it's actually not the coffee. It's like I love creating spaces for people to come and talk. Like these types of spaces are like really amazing. I love being a part of and seeing is because like, you come up here, you learn about different people's like perspective or where they came from, their stories, and that's kind of something I've always loved about Medici, and something Matt and I would do a podcast kind of talking about this kind of stuff. And it's like anything associated with like human experience is like just so exciting for me, and I love to learn. So, or like the sauna, we sit in the sauna and everyone discusses things, and it's like there's so many places for it. So Medici's just another one of those places that happens. So.
And so the
coffee's good too.
And you've got 5 locations plus one at the airport.
5 in an airport, and we have a roasting facility. I mean, I've started 9. We've lost 2 during the pandemic, 2 because they were just bad decisions. Started a bakery. I've started a lot more businesses than that have failed, but those are the ones that are living, so that's good.
Well, that's a good segue of where I wanted to go next. I graduated college in 2006, and I think everyone, or so many people my age and younger, have gone into this like big corporate business straight out of school, and I've since gotten myself out of that from getting in the Bitcoin rabbit hole and starting working on Unchained and now working on Zaprate and building a business from scratch. But you guys are both individuals who, when people think about businesses, they think so much about the stock market, but there's only 4,000 public companies in America. There's 35 million businesses, and the vast majority of those are small businesses. But running small business is really difficult. So just wanted you to talk a little bit. You talked a little bit about how, you've got 5, but you had 9, and you had other businesses. But just talking about some of the challenges of running a small business. You mentioned your first year, I don't know if it's your first year, but you had $1 million of sales and $5,000 of profit. So if you could just talk about the day-to-day challenges that people that are working for larger companies might not, appreciate when they're showing up and just getting products off the shelf or showing up and getting coffee at the store.
Yeah, well, coming from the digital ad space, which for a while was quite lucrative and had very good margins, I thought I was a good business operator. And I was quickly humbled by the farming world because it's very capital intensive. We are exposed to risk factors we have no control over. So weather, drought has been a problem for us occasionally. Pathogens can make animals sick, and predation. And then, obviously over the last several years, inflation's been a big one that squeezed us a lot. And current cattle prices are, we are a grass finishing operation. So we buy calves in from one ranch. We have a small breeding operation too, but not big enough to support our beef business. So we bring in calves from one ranch. Well, I was paying $1.68 a pound for those calves 3.5 years ago, and I just trucked in 100 calves and paid $3.50 a pound for those calves. And my beef prices have not gone up proportionally. I don't think they can. I don't think anybody'd buy the beef if I did that. So the risk factors in farming are big, and the margins are super thin. So you've got to be really vigilant about managing that. And that took me a while to figure out. Of course, starting the business, you know what this is like. You're starting a business. You're the money guy. You're the sweat equity guy. You're the marketing guy. You're all the stuff. And so the first couple of years, I would go months without reconciling anything. And then I just wasn't hearing from anybody that my checks weren't clearing. So I was like, I think we're okay. And then once every 2 months or so, I'd sit down and have a full day freak out. My wife tiptoeing around me, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then I'd figure out that we were at least solvent, and we'd move on with our lives. But to answer your question, for my business in particular, the risk factors are numerous, and we have very little control over them. Oftentimes in a business, you're like, what are my risk factors? What could threaten my business, and how can I mitigate that? And it's like, I've tried talking to God, and he hasn't responded back about the rain and stuff yet. But it's just, you have to build your business to manage through those times. But yeah.
Michael, how about you?
This is great. I love this. It took me 5 years to realize that nobody else knew what the hell they were doing. So like I'm a barista who has a degree in philosophy and history, and I'm starting a business. You know, it's like I'm passionate about coffee, I'm passionate about community and stuff like that, but then you also have to learn how to run a business. And I was looking around at me and all these small businesses and other businesses, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they got it all figured out. And I'm like, and just wondering why it's like I'm just struggling so much. And then after a while, I was like, oh, none of you guys know what the hell you're doing. It's like you're making shit up too as you go. And it's like that was actually the most comforting thing to me, was just to kind of like, you know, there's people with more experience, like that's one thing, but it's like it's such a creative thing being in business, and it's really hard, and you kind of have to, like, my favorite thing to tell us, I talk to a lot of people when I open up coffee shops or businesses, and I tell them not to do it. And it's if I can't convince them not to do it, then they're ready. But if I can convince you not to open your business, then you probably don't want to open up a business. You know, it's like that. It really takes a lot of bruises and ups and downs. And you know, you all of a sudden you're paying $1.82, now you're paying $3.62. It's like, you know, where coffee, you know, it's like sometimes you see a lot of people in a coffee shop, and you're like, wow, this place is booming. It's like, well, it's not like a bar. If a bar is full, people are buying, you know, $30 to $50 worth of drinks. You know, but you go in a coffee shop and it's full. It's like that's $5. That's $5. You know, or a table is like, you know, $120, and that table turns 3 or 4 times. And so with a coffee shop, it's like you really have to have that volume in order to survive. And that's the great thing about coffee, is like most people in coffee are very idealistic and are amazing people, but we're not great business people. And I think that's the part that has really kind of changed over the years, is like all my young friends that were, you know, baristas and are opening shops. So it's like some of that idealism kind of got knocked off a little bit. I'm like, okay, we have to run a business, you know? So that's been kind of like I don't know if that answered your question, but that's been kind of like my business journey, is like kind of learning, and also just learning from other people, talking to other business owners. And it's just really helpful also to hear of other people's struggles, that it's not as pretty as it looks on the outside. You know, it's like, you want everybody else to make it look like, oh, everything's fine here. You're like, I'm moving.
One of the things that both of you guys mentioned on the inflation side, and the podcast that you recorded with Marty, and for those of you guys who are interested, I believe it was around this time last year, maybe it was October, or maybe it was October or September. I think it was just a year. Like time like feels like it both flies and then stays still. But I think it was only like a year ago, maybe like October or September of 2024. But one of the things that I think prompted the appearance is I had been tracking a ribeye, a specific ribeye at Whole Foods, calling it the ribeye index, and it triggers a bunch of fiat people that are like, you can't measure inflation by just looking at one ribeye. And I'm like, but it's the same store, you know, it's the same thing, so it's the best way. But the shirt tail eggs had gone from $8 to $8.75. And I had mentioned it, and then Marty had reached out. I think maybe you guys had connected before, but on the podcast you were explaining how really you're in a position of after the fact, having to look at your financial position and then having to essentially true up. And when you're running the business day to day, you're not necessarily, you know, locked in of what's happening in the current month or what happened over the prior month. And so if you just talk about the challenge of inflation, of not just like the gross level, but in terms of, you know, because one of the ways that I think about it, but I'm curious your perspective on it, is you figure out a business model and then your inputs are constantly changing, and you're not having to reinvent the business, but you're constantly having to focus on things that if those prices weren't changing as much, you might be spending your time and energy in other places. But if you could talk about that, and I think I remember it correctly, where I was like, hey, you know, you're basically readjusting for the past, of saying like, I don't, you know, I set these prices, but a lot of things changed, and you're not changing your prices weekly or monthly even. And so you can actually get to a position where, oh, like the prices I have are actually way out of date, and now I need to retroactively account for that to go forward.
Yeah, well, when we first set prices for our products, I went to like 3 other farms in my area's websites and found out what their prices were, and just like did an average and just said, that's what I'll sell it for. I don't know what it's going to cost me to do any of this. I don't know what I'm doing. I learned most of what I know about farming from YouTube, to be honest with you. And frankly, if you bought a steak for me like the first 6 months that we were butchering cattle, I'm sorry, because it was too lean and we didn't know what we were doing. I since then got really geeked out on how to grass finish beef, and there's some great books I can recommend if you want to geek out on that. But yeah, we didn't know what we needed to charge. I just, I had some savings, and I got a couple rent houses here, and I thought, well, shit, I'll take a year to figure it out. And so, yeah, so then, and that was fine in the beginning. Then COVID happened, and sales volumes went up, and that was cool for a little while. It's an apocalypse. It turns out it's great for a food business when people are freaking out. You can't get toilet paper, and then you just got to find your local farm. A lot of friends from college came out of the woodwork. But yeah, in terms of inflation, I mean, I first noticed it when my diesel bill went from $4,000 a month to $7,500 a month on the farm, and I was like, shit. And that's one of the input costs that has come back down, right? But a lot of these, anything made out of metal, paper, packaging materials, they went up, and for the most part, kind of stayed that way. Commodities, which we don't buy in a lot of commodities, but those go up and down. But yeah, our price adjustments are not frequent. Like you go to H-E-B and the price of the ribeye might be different every week. And for us, it's like we set a price, and then we don't want to think about that because we're busy running the farm and raising our kids, and we don't have a big team of buyers that are thinking about these things. And of course, we're not buying in meat to resell. So there's a delay. So we've historically always been too slow to adjust our pricing. And we get to a point where we're like, Jesus, what are we doing? We've got to do something. And then, of course, I'm the little capitalist in the family, and my wife is the, concerned about everybody's feelings. And so we have to have those conversations about, you can't go up on that price. It'll offend people. I'm like, yeah, but have you seen the checking account? Is that not offensive? And so, yeah, but it's we're always too late to the game, and we've gotten a little better about that. But it's tough too, because we don't want to make big changes that are knee jerk or quick, because some of these things happen and then calm back down. And so, like the egg shortage, like people were like, why aren't you selling your eggs for $12 a dozen? Like, you can't get them at the store, and we didn't change our price at all. It's because, we obviously have personal relationships with many of our customers, but, we don't want to gouge people. We now let our cost of production drive our pricing, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said before, I want to get Michael's view on the same thing relative to his business. The first time that I met Johnny, who's here preparing such fine food for us, was through Texas Slim. And Texas Slim had introduced me to Cole Bolton from K&C Cattle that's in East Austin. But he had, really, it's like memes are powerful, but it was this, go shake your rancher's hand. And that connected for me because, and this was before, or no, this was after the scamdemic. But it was like, hey, these people freaked out and there wasn't food on the shelves, and it's important to have relationships with people that prepare your food, and that there's a part of it that's about economics, but there's another part of it that's about, hey, like, you have people that are taking care of you and your family, and you might not think about it that way on a day-to-day basis, but that's what it is, and having a relationship with those people is an important part to truly appreciating what they do. So I think that, like, part of the food security is, like, not just going to the big box, but making the stop by a local Pastures and changing that consumption model. So I do think it's like, you're not necessarily thinking about prepping, but you also do need to be a more long-term thinker than might be convenient day to day. So I just wanted to say that because it is real. Talk a little bit about inflation in your business and how you deal with it.
I don't think I understood what inflation was until like the whole pandemic COVID thing, and it was really once. I always point to Matt because we kind of do everything together, so it's like same head, different bodies. But that was when we started exploring Bitcoin, and just like a lot of stuff started making more sense on the business side for me, which is like, okay, I need to raise my prices. People are raising their prices for me, so I got to raise my prices because I got to make up this margin. And again, I don't want to raise it too much. Like, $3.50 for an espresso, is that too much? I want people to drink it. I want people to come, and so I think until like I started getting into Bitcoin and understanding, I was like, oh man, how much is inflation? Like I heard 2 to 3%, and now I'm starting to hear like 8 to 12%. Like how is that? What? And then this whole basket of goods thing. What is this? It's like all of a sudden it's this huge puzzle that we're trying to figure out, and it's just really frustrating. So really I think it's really in the last 2 years, like I've really started to understand like what that means and what that means for my business. But I think my business has suffered because I haven't understood kind of what inflation is and where these costs are coming from. And just kind of like where we are with Bitcoin, like I've had two kind of like almost like business ending moments. And one was in 2013 and one was in the pandemic. And, as far as like having to decide how we were going to move forward. And something that I've just kind of like just been seeing just in the whole Bitcoin journey type thing is like, I do see this idea of like, if I just put a little bit aside every year, every month, every day, that I can have this sort of like nest egg that's there for either, hey, maybe we can do something interesting with this, open a new store, or when these big occurrences come, I have something to kind of go to. And that's kind of like a new idea for me. And I didn't really understand like why this was a new idea. And just the things I was learning is because we're not encouraged to save because there's not much that's going to keep our value into the future. And I don't think I understood that was kind of like ingrained in me. So I was always kind of just spending money. And it's like, oh, I just put more and more money into my business because that's the best thing I can do. And that's great. But I'm always like, I'm a risk taker. So I have to like also learn how to like put money other places. And so this has actually taught me to put money other places than just keep like investing in my business. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, it does. But that was actually the next place that I want to go. But in terms of understanding a little bit about each of your understandings of Bitcoin and the journey. So maybe you could just elaborate, like was the shutdown and then the kind of explosion of pricing around them, but just maybe talk a little bit more about your descent down the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
I think there's a lot of confusion just in general, and the money part was something that it's like I loved getting the checks from the government. It was awesome. It's like we bought a pool with it, like a little like outside pool, and then it's like again, this is before it just really started to click. It's like how can we keep doing this? And so I think that's and then we get the PPP stuff, and then I got an EIDL loan, and don't get me wrong, like that really helped us get through stuff, but I think I would have done things differently if I hadn't had those things. And because again, we kept people on and we tried to make things move that weren't ready to move. And because of the world around us was shutting down and we're like trying to survive. And I think there's probably some things that if we didn't, that we probably would have made different decisions. Now, I am thankful for it because I didn't know the things I do now about that. But I don't know if did that answer your question? Or?
Just like speak a little bit about just from that point to if that was 2020 to today of how your understanding of Bitcoin is evolved.
Well, I've kind of had 3 categories of Bitcoin. It's kind of like one's kind of like daily spending kind of idea. It's like paycheck type stuff, which I don't recommend to anybody, but I feel like I'm okay with that volatility. Then there's kind of midterm stuff that I have. Then there's kind of more my 3 to 5 to forever kind of stuff. That's cold storage and that kind of jazz. So it's like, I think that's kind of like how I see, like even with my business is like in accepting Bitcoin is like, there's something that for me is really helpful as far as like I'm not paying the 3.6%. And I'm only like, it's a very small charge compared to that. We put money away every, it's a daily buy that we do for our business. And sometimes we tap into it a little bit, but it's like the idea is that over time that we can just keep building that. So I think that's the part, like, again, I want to keep it's hard for me to speak to this actually, because like a lot of these things are more problems I'm trying to solve right now. And it's neat to see like all of our conversations about ZapRide, about all these different things that people are doing. And I think that's the part where like as people build more things that are making it easier for businesses, like I don't have time to, make sure if it's not easy for my baristas, they're not going to do it. And I can't sit there and be like, you need to do this whenever they have all these other responsibilities. So like that's the thing with Square that's really made it helpful. And so but the problems I'm trying to solve is like, as far as like even just pay paying people more, healthcare, keeping our prices in a reasonable place. And I think these are things that are really hard because there's so many moving elements, and there's like the personal side of like, how do you pay people? People are always, I want more money. Everybody wants more money, and I just don't know how it works and how to actually meet those needs. And so I find that the things that we can build on Bitcoin are going to actually help us solve those problems. And Square, what Square's just done is made it super easy. I mean, dude, I just like turn 5%, and it just kind of takes 5% of my cells and puts it over there, and then I can put it in my own like River or Unchained or something like that. And then, people can come and pay. It's like that just took something completely away that I've had to manage, to move stuff over here, make sure it's like, oh, is that daily buy still going? Oh no, so I gotta, it's like I think those types of things I'm really excited about that helps us kind of like mitigate. But the inflation thing is really hard because we got coffee prices are going up, tariffs. But if it's not tariffs, it's everyone's like gets all been out of shape about tariffs. It's like, well, if it's not tariffs, it's coffee rust. If it's not coffee rust, it's an unrest in Ethiopia. So it's like we're always dealing with coffee prices going all over the place and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just kind of really interested in the different applications, a way that people are building on top of this and making it more easier access for businesses and people to use.
Yeah, and I think one thing you said is, and this is kind of my personal long-term vision of Bitcoin, is when they're making more money, everybody's like literally when they're creating trillions of dollars. The Fed created $5 trillion new dollars from 2020 to 2022. It's like when they're making more money, everybody's thinking about, I need more money. And there's the real world challenges of that, of input prices changing, and then you needing to move your business around that moving target. And that if you simply take away the ability for anybody to create more money, it's not to say that people don't need money, but they literally will stop thinking about money nearly as much because their money will store purchasing power. Now, Sam, you were somebody who started accepting Bitcoin on your online store before we even met. And I think you're a little bit earlier in your journey than Michael is. But just talk a little bit about your experience in your evolving understanding, albeit from a earlier stage in your own journey of first accepting it. I think one of the things that you mentioned on Marty's podcast, which I think is very common, which is you're running your business, you got all the different problems, you got inflation, you're dealing with it. Bitcoin doesn't solve the problem of inflation overnight, and that it's difficult for somebody to say like, oh, Bitcoin's this thing. My thing is running my farm. I don't have the time to go evaluate an investment. And one of the messages that we try to share with people is it's like money is an everybody problem, every business. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about from the stage of first accepting it on your online store, but then me hounding you to read a chapter. But just where, and I do think it's only been like a year, but just kind of how your thinking around Bitcoin has changed in the early time that you've been both accepting it and thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a slow adopter of technology and new things in general in my life. I put it this way, I eat the same thing for breakfast and lunch every day, and the only reason there's variety in my dinner is because my wife prepares that, and she doesn't like to do the same thing all the time. So the idea of Bitcoin for me, I didn't readily understand it, and then I didn't. I'm very ADHD, so I didn't allocate bandwidth to like focusing and trying to really wrap my head around this. And I think what really initially got me thinking about Bitcoin seriously was that the one fundamental thing I learned with starting our business is you want to remove barriers for your customers. And there happened to be a really wonderful, strong contingency of people that use Bitcoin that like to buy beef or like to support local farms and buy food with that. And so it made sense that, okay, I can accept Bitcoin. I don't have to hold it in Bitcoin. And So that was like, why isn't everybody already doing this? And so I had that sort of epiphany. But then getting it set up on the website was clunky in the beginning. The solution was going to be people can preload a gift card and use it for Square, but then we sell online through Shopify, and then Square's at the farmers markets, and it was kind of weird. And so the fact that Square has done what they've done has been great. And then we integrated with Stripe through Shopify, to accept Bitcoin payments there on the website, and that's been good. Didn't revolutionize our business, but it definitely made a difference, and I think it's been valuable. But yeah, and I'm not a big Bitcoin expert, but I do hold Bitcoin, and a lot of times when I sell beef, more often than not, I leave that money in Bitcoin. So yeah, I'm a student, and got this guy on my texts that I can bother all the time when I've got questions.
Talk a little bit about, since you've launched, just operationally, like how now if you go to either the Old Torf location or the local pastures on North Lamar, you can pay with Bitcoin there. But just talk about from like the employee communication, how easy it's been, how confused or not confused, like operationally. Has it been fairly easy for employees to figure out, where are you getting complaints from people that are working from the stores? Just curious about, it's only been about a month, but curious that.
No. So just to clarify, I think we already did this, but I've got Shertail Creek Farm, and then we're partners in local pasture stores here in Austin, which we sell our Shertail products through, and as well as other local farms products. That's been really easy because we already use Square, so it was just a matter of sending a message out to the staff saying, hey, we now accept Bitcoin in the stores. Here's how you do it. It's very simple and very seamless, so it has not been an issue.
Yeah, and in my own experience going to the store, the employees were like, in all the cases when I've done it with somebody for the first time, they're excited about it. Genuinely, they're like, oh, yeah, we do. Well, let me see. And then they see it, and there's people standing in line, and I can see them smiling. So the idea of it was a big effort for Square to do this, and meeting businesses where they are is critical to making it work. I remember the day that you guys launched. Sam did something in the morning on the account side. 3 of us went over an hour later, and 3 of us in line, one after another. Each purchase super easy, and I think that putting it in not just business owners' hands, but in a way where the employees can interact with it in a way that they don't need to understand what's happening in the background is important to success. So, curious your experience with your stores. It's now available in all 5 stores, not the airport, but Clarksville, South Lamar, Springdale, Domain, and then Guadalupe.
Yeah, so it's really it was just kind of really easy. It's like, hey, this is another form of payment, and this is what we're doing, and it really was so easy to do. Where we were talking about before, you had to have another terminal, and the baristas had to know exactly how to work the other terminal to do those things, and I think that's what made this just so easy and so seamless. Even with actually that's good to know. Through Strike, you can use Bitcoin on Shopify. Okay, well that solves my problem. Thank you. Well, I had a Coinbase account that we were using on Shopify to process.
We did that too for a while, and then I was told that's not cool.
Oh,
well, it's just not that it's not cool. Coinbase literally removed the ability to pay in Bitcoin. It's a total backwards. They got good marketing, but they affinity scan Bitcoin.
But at the time, I was told, hey, I saw you set that up, and that's a great step in the right direction, Sam. Good for you. But among the Bitcoin community, the Coinbase is not exactly, yeah. So, yeah, I was like, oh, shit, I had no idea.
Well, yeah, so I did that, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I guess some changes in KYC change or something like that, and then I couldn't access my account. And so I've spent the last 3 years, every 2 or 3 months, I'll go back and spend 45 minutes trying to access it again. anyway, still haven't accessed it. So I'm glad Strike is doing. Okay, I'll change that now. Sorry, what was your question? You solved my problem, so I had to
just the ease with which I don't want to say ease, but whether or not employees have had an easy time, a hard time, kind of how it's gone operationally for the first month.
I think it's great, especially just like the people that are using. I mean, we probably get maybe 2 or 3 transactions a day out of 5 stores, so it's not a lot, but it does kind of create the conversation. Even as we've been talking about, because kind of prior to this, I was working on an app that way we could buy Bitcoin, we had gift cards, and it was a crazy stuff. So I was already talking to my staff, my upper management about this, and so we started reading Lynn Alden's book, Broken Money. We have our book club next week, so. On that, and so so I think it's really important that people actually do come in and use Bitcoin because it makes people curious, and then you are able to talk about these things. Like my kids have to read Lynn Alden's book before they get a little Bitcoin whenever they turn 18, and so it's like, but they have to read Lynn Alden's book, and I think that's the part, like just using Bitcoin in stores is something that strikes up that conversation, and that people will actually start to learn about their finances, and I think that's something that's super important because even just with you graduate high school, you graduate college, and it's like you don't know anything about a balance sheet, a P&L, cash flow, what is savings. Like I think I put stuff into bonds when I was in 2003 when I was working, and I cashed those in it was absolutely stupid. But that's what I grew up with is like, oh, you do bonds and you save in this. It's like there's this whole new savings instrument that our kids and young people specifically need to know about, because it's going to change their future if they just put a little bit aside. And so I think the more that we use this technology, and the more that like people like Square and make it easier and easier for people to transact, I think that helps kind of revolutionize like how people use their money and understand money. And that's why I'm super excited about it. Even if it's only 2 or 3 transactions a day, it's like every time I see one, I'm like, yeah.
Well, one of the cool experiences I had at the store, I go to local Pastures every week, and I always, if you're familiar with the Unchained shirts that have on the back, friends don't let friends sell Bitcoin. Occasionally, I'd talk to the person that runs the store about Bitcoin, and then when we were in the process of getting you set up in the week or two before, I was like, oh, we're getting local Pastures set up to accept Bitcoin, and the woman who worked the store was like, well, I thought you weren't supposed to let friends sell Bitcoin. I was like, well, yes, but, and then when it was actually turned on, same woman was working at the store. I came in and paid. She saw how easy it was, and she was like, I wonder if they would pay me some in Bitcoin. And she was like, that seemed really easy. So it's just it is the end game in my mind. I think to this point, I was telling Sam this before, that probably 99% of people who figured out Bitcoin to this point have had to have, to a large degree, vision for how it's going to play out, why someone would save in a form of money that can't be printed, go down some form of a rabbit hole to figure out if that's actually true in Bitcoin or not. But the vast majority of everyone in the world, the 99%, they will come to understand Bitcoin as they're seeing it used as money. And so having Square take this step, and then having business owners like these guys open up the avenue to take it at their store is a big step forward. And it will not only demonstrate to people that see it being used and say, like, this isn't just something that we look into the digital ether. There's an outlet to this, and it's going to be used to actually buy things like food and buy things like coffee. So I think this is a huge step, and will be not only big for Bitcoin, but also big for business owners to have a tool to be able to allow people like yourselves to go to these local businesses and use your Bitcoin. Because a lot of people in this room, a lot more than the average person of their savings is in Bitcoin, and it's actually easier if it's made available to them. So I want to thank both of you guys. I want to turn it over to questions, and a big part of this is not just about Square and Bitcoin payments. It's about you guys getting a chance to meet these 2 business owners and understanding their businesses and what they're about. So it's a great chance to be able to ask some questions. We'll take a few. Whoa.
How about now? All right, much better.
I'm curious, y'all are both Bitcoiners individually. There we go. Yeah, I think it's working now. When y'all accept Bitcoin, do you hold any of it on your corporate balance sheets yet, or is it still a transition into fiat, or are you actually? Does the business own Bitcoin as well?
Yeah, my farm does. The stores currently don't. I have partners who are, newer to the Bitcoin thing. They're not anti-Bitcoin, but we have not made a collective decision to hold Bitcoin with the local Pastures stores. But the farm does. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We've since 2021, I think I started with our business. First with Coinbase back in 2021, and then now we use River and Unchained, and always trying to put stuff aside. And we do tap it and bring stuff out. And then everything was Square. I'm playing around with some different ideas. Again, I'm a risk taker, so anything I say, I'll probably wait another 6 or 12 months before I tell you my crazy stuff I do. But it's but most of our Bitcoin that we just transaction wise, we're not doing anything with right now. But I have been putting different percentages into, kind of playing around with some ideas with that, where I've taken some out because there's a study I did about a year ago, where if I took all my payments in dollars and moved them into Bitcoin every single day. So I used I used the Bitcoin close price of every day, and then I put all my revenue into of the day, and I just say okay, I put it in the Bitcoin every single day, and then end of 30 days, I sold all my cost of goods to pay all my bills and stuff like that. So there'll always be something left over or negative because if it went down or up. And so I looked at it from 2020 to 2024. And I think if I had done that, even with the whole downturn, at the end of that whole process of me doing that, it would have been an extra $680,000 arbitrage. But the thing is, you have to suck through the bad times. Get through the bad times, It's so it sucked. Yeah, there you go. It sucks to be in a. So I did that also with my personal finances too. So it's there's a part of I'm okay with spending Bitcoin because it's I put it in there and I spend it or take it out to pay for bills because I see the long trajectory. There's actually kind of an arbitrage that happens, but it's over a long period of time. And again, these are things I'm comfortable with. I actually wouldn't tell people to do it. Like I said, I'm telling you guys right now. So there's a lot of things like that with our business too that I've done. And I'm just playing around with. I do have some set aside that I do a daily buy for our business. And I've been doing that for about 3 or 4 years. And I just see a business fresh starting out that doesn't have the baggage of COVID and a past like that. It's I see the future of small businesses in a way that's so much more encouraging to me now. Because there's another problem that we're going to face too, that, why would anybody invest in a business that's doing less than 30% CAGR? It's that's a hard sell for a small business owner. Because that's the part I'm also thinking about too, is I would just tell people about buy Bitcoin. Why invest in my coffee shop? That's just an honest, you're not to mention a new operator, that's even more risk, So I think there's some things there that I would like to see some creative things and things that I'm thinking about too, as far as how to help small businesses, basically be able to raise money, but then also, because then it's almost you start, which is also interesting too, because then if you start kind of getting on this Bitcoin standard and understanding Bitcoin, it's then you also start to invest in things that you believe in. It's not necessarily about the money that you're going to make on it. Obviously, you want to make some return on it, but it's it's got to actually be something that you believe in. So I think there also might be some really interesting businesses that kind of come out of that'll be really beautiful, But I think it is a problem for business in general, small business in general. Over here.
Hey guys, Aaron from Voltage Lightning Payments. We do the Bitcoin Layer 2, which is all about payments with Bitcoin. And I'm a happy customer of both of yours. Great beef, great coffee. For years, we've been customers. And I did a Bitcoin purchase at Medici the other day, and it was super smooth. It was great. The one on South Lamar was great. Posted about it, got a ton of action on LinkedIn around it. So people are hungry for it, and so I want it to happen, and I understand, and I'm working closely with Jack and Miles at Square on how they've set it up, and I know that it's 0% fees for merchants throughout all the way till the end of December 31st, 2026, which is if you take a blended rate 3 to 5% on cards, you can save a lot of money as a merchant. My question is, have you considered how you incentivize the average pedestrian retail consumer to take a little bit of extra time out of their day, maybe to consider purchasing with Bitcoin? If you're getting 0%, what's the best way to pass that on to the customer? You don't want to, ruin that extra profit margin, but yeah, how do you incentivize additional? I mean, I think those of us here, we're in. How do we get more folks on the bandwagon? You guys have pretty big platforms. How can you take that benefit that Square's giving you and use it to get more retail customers?
I think he's hinting at a loyalty program. Yeah. Which is smart. And, we have not yet adopted that, but I think we need to. I mean, we have a loyalty program, but not one that rewards people in Bitcoin. But I think that's smart, and I think it obviously does incentivize people to use Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think it's a real problem because it's like basically the only people that are going to be using Bitcoin are people that are comfortable with using Bitcoin. Like onboarding new people, like that's huge. There's what I would like to do versus what is reality, but like expecting like my baristas to be on that side of things is really kind of a hard ask because I think that's what you would have to have as far as I think the baby steps maybe to something like that, because I think that's the next question is, okay, there's all of us early adopters and that are, I mean, I'm only really comfortable doing like Lightning payments in the last like probably year or so. And so like even me as somebody who's like, I feel like I'm somewhat way into this, is I'm still sort of a newbie in how you interact with this in a public way. And so I think that's kind of the next part. I think like Square making it so easy to like just, at least all of us that kind of know what we're doing or do know what we're doing can do this. And then the next part, I think the more that we do this, then that sort of it's like that next wave of adopters comes in. But that's the part, it's the technology aspect that needs to get better and better that help. It becomes almost like the financial system,
Yeah, I've got an idea on this, so maybe you can take this, but then also it's about customers of Square asking them for it. The thing that I've seen that's made the most sense to me is that Landry's, which is a big restaurant conglomerate out of Houston, they have a Bitcoin rewards program, and the way that it works is the person, they earn points, but it's denominated in sats. It's perpetual. They reserve the Bitcoin, and then the customer is incentivized to change their behavior. They, like cash backs never made sense to me. I'm like, why don't you just make my thing cheaper? But if I could only spend it at your businesses and it was reserved and held there, then like I've got a friend in Houston who goes to Landry's all the time. He's got $5,000 in Bitcoin with Landry's, and he doesn't want to spend it. He wants to keep going back and spending more, and he sees it there. He could use it anytime he wants, but he knows to save it. And so over time, if the business is fully reserving it, then when someone does spend it, it's not taxable. It just transfers into the business's treasury, and then they can sell if they want to. But that was the thing that made the most sense. I shared that with Miles. I was like, look at this rewards program, this loyalty program. This is the one that makes the most sense to me. So we can talk more about that. I'd love for Square to do that.
Okay, 2 questions. And I must be so far down the rabbit hole because in my mind, when businesses are taking in Bitcoin, they're like putting it in their secret Bitcoin wallet. But something you told me earlier, Sam, which is the money comes in as Bitcoin and then it's immediately transferred into dollars.
For the stores, yeah.
Okay, I find that interesting because something that you mentioned, which was you get free transactions up until 2026, but transferring those dollars, doesn't that cost money? And at what point does it become too expensive to actually accept Bitcoin? And then my second question for you both is, what percentage of customers are actually using Bitcoin right now?
It's a small percentage for us, although for the farm, it's usually larger purchases, $500 plus, let's say. The important consideration is that the bulk of our expenses of our vendors that we use don't accept Bitcoin. And so when I hold Bitcoin in the farm business, because my wife and I own that business, I can do whatever I want. Well, I got to consult with her, but if we are having positive cash flow and I don't absolutely need that, I'll leave it in Bitcoin. But for the stores, we'll probably get to a point where we may hold some Bitcoin, but my partners just aren't. They're very focused on their farm and haven't really wrapped their heads around it. So, in terms of the fees, I didn't know that there was a zero fee.
I should have told you about that. I don't know.
I read something about there being a fee, but I'm again ADHD. I think I skimmed the thing and signed it or whatever, and so I must have missed the part about the probationary 0% fee. But that's good news.
But the other thing that I'll say too is that once the fee kicks in at the end of December 2026, it's going to be 1%. So each one will be, still saving 2%, and that does go a long way. If you've got a 10%, 15% margin business, an extra 2%. And so my answer, because I've thought about this, is that where Square is saving is they're not incurring the credit card fee. Right, so when someone's actually paying in Bitcoin, there's no credit card involved, right? So Square is just basically saying, just like a credit card processor doesn't charge you once the funds are in your account to go to the bank, Square has the dollars that are sitting there and then basically does an ACH transfer, and the ACH transfer is a much cheaper transaction than a credit card. So it's basically cutting the credit card out completely. Yeah, it's less risky too, so there's not a risk of a chargeback. Which is the way it typically works is like at the end of the day, all the payments from that day. Yeah, the merchant doesn't pay that. The payer, it is a consideration of the payer. And one of the things that's great about the Square launch is that now that Square's in the game, they're helping lobby to get a de minimis exception. So for those of you guys who are not familiar, if we get a de minimis exception, then each time someone's spending at the store, we're not incurring a tax event. What I would say to that as a Bitcoin user who does it, and I think this might apply to a lot of people, the majority of my savings are in Bitcoin. I'm going between fiat and Bitcoin regularly, so I'm already having to deal with that. So by Sam accepting it as store, it just saves me the pain of having to get more into fiat to then pay him fiat, and him having Square basically take care of that in a way that's seamless to him, that he doesn't even need to mess with it. So he doesn't have any tax event on his side. To the payer, it is a source of friction, but if you're already kind of going back and forth between Bitcoin and fiat, you're incurring that as it is. But certainly, like, the de minimis exception will be another big wave to helping make it easier for people to come in the store more frequently to pay. But in my mind, people in DC need to see that whether they're doing this or not, people are using it. And by them not moving, they're introducing friction and stifling innovation. Maybe answer like how easy it was from the Square side to turn it on, or how difficult potentially.
Yeah, it was literally just a couple clicks in Square. They probably don't know about it. It's a very new feature, and I think is it still in beta?
I think they consider it beta, but it's available to everybody.
It's available, okay. Yeah, I just don't think it's been promoted heavily yet, but it's quite easy to do. Yeah, I don't know. I was blown away at how simple it was. We just selected that we wanted to do it, and then I think I filled out a page. I don't know what it was, but it was super quick and easy, and then it just worked. That's it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when you check someone out in Square, you can do credit card, you can accept cash, Cash App, whatever. It's just one of the options on the list. The cashier just selects Bitcoin, it shows the QR code, and boom.
Yeah, we actually have a Square terminal. Maybe afterwards, Nick, we could log in and people can see it. If somebody, and that's one of the things that I know that Square is planning to do in a future iteration fairly soon, is right now you have to know that the store accepts Bitcoin. You have to tell them that you want to pay. But if you do, it's the same number of clicks. It's like rather than the tap to pay or credit card, they just need to know that you want Bitcoin and they select Bitcoin rather than tap to pay. But I'd say that is, and maybe the farmer's market's different. Maybe Sam, you could share some insights on this of like what percentage of the owners are actually at the farmer's market, because if it's somebody that doesn't own the business, it might make more sense to email, like to go to the website, email them so that the business owner sees it and says, hey, can you turn this on? And let them know that it can be auto-converted and that you can save the 3% credit card fee, which I forgot to tell Sam in the midst of all of my excitement.
I think more than half of sellers at farmers markets are business owners. We were up until a couple of years ago when my kids, I started missing football games and stuff and realized I couldn't do that. But yeah, and again, I think all these business owners want to make it easier for you to transact with them. So as soon as they understand that they don't have to expose themselves to the risk of the volatility of Bitcoin, then it's like, well, then what? Like, what reason do you have to not accept Bitcoin? You can immediately transfer it into U.S. dollar or hold it. It's up to you. So,
And also just be kind too, because they might be like, if you approach them like, hey, why don't you use Bitcoin? And just like, one more thing. It's just that's kind of like, even though their face might not say that, that's kind of maybe going on behind the scenes. So it's like just one more thing. So you want coconut milk, cat milk, and it's like and Bitcoin. Okay, it's like, but they'll be like, oh yeah, let's look into it. But I think just asking is like, hey, can I pay in Bitcoin? And it's like, I think just asking that question is a helpful thing. It's like, yeah, Square just made it really super easy. Like I was listening to Sam and Michael talk about it at this thing, and they said they just flipped a switch and it went on. And it's like, I was just checking if you guys had it. It's like, I think just doing that's pretty easy to do. But do know that it's like sometimes like if they're not familiar with the negative aspect of it, you might kind of get the, okay. sort of
Yeah, it's like read the audience. 'Cause there is a funny story. One of the things, Steak and Shake, I think if you guys are hardened Bitcoiners, you've seen that in the last 6 months to a year, Steak and Shake has leaned into Bitcoin payments and they're really going heavy into the marketing. And I saw somewhere online that a Bitcoiner had gone to one of the Steak and Shakes around before it had turned on. They're like, hey, are you guys going to be accepting Bitcoin? Like, I want to bring a bunch of people over here. And that business owner, even though like Bitcoin has come a long way in normalizing, the franchise owner was like, oh, please don't. Like, honestly, I really don't like Bitcoin. And then 6 months going in the future, Steak and Shake's talking about how their same-store sales are up 15%, and they attribute a lot of it to leaning into Bitcoin. And so hopefully that store owner is now being like, oh, this was good for me. But at the same time, like, it's still, most people, I would say, have come around to it not being for drugs and the dark web, but that's not everybody. So read the audience.
yeah, and you'll get, I don't know, many of you are probably small business owners too, but you got a lot on your plate. You got a freezer that's broken or a thing that you got to pay for or some bill you got to come up with. And so, if I had $1 for every time someone suggested to me a better way to run my business, I'd have a lot of dollars. But it's so you may not always get a great response or an enthusiastic response, but I think, those conversations have to happen in order to get it there. So
I think one thing that the cash flow thing, I think you were talking, like you kind of brought up, it's like, I don't really even think about it as like, how much Bitcoin are we holding or keeping? Because like we're business and cash flow, we're moving cash. And so one day it's like, it's not cash, it's Bitcoin that's moving, so it's like, so yes, I want at the end of the day to have like that Bitcoin number to get bigger for my business that's on, but my goal is not to hold the Bitcoin. My goal is to run the business. So you're going to have money flowing. And so that's what like yesterday, because I pulled some out for rent that I've been using my Square for. And it's like, that was so easy. Like, it wasn't I had to wait 2 or 3 days. It's like, hey, I sold it on this day. It was in my account the next day, and rents are going out. So my wheels start turning. Then that it's like, oh wow, actually the the scenario that I did is actually becoming more of a reality now because of the tools in place to do that. So that's kind of exciting for me to see, like, okay, how can this sort of flow and not just be, it's not just a store of value, but it can also be a unit of exchange. So it's starting to make more sense to me anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for businesses is like if they're starting to save in Bitcoin, they need to know that they can get to dollars and that they'll get into their bank account quickly if they need them. And until they see that happen, there is that reservation. And so, another side of it is it does speed up the cash cycle because rather than 2 or 3 days to process, the Bitcoin are there and it can move and be in your bank account the next day. But that is a very logical source of, is this actually going to be able to turn back into dollars if I need it? Because everybody has dollar-based costs.
Bitcoin. What's the next desired step that would improve your business rather than paying out vendors for green beans, coffee feed, rent, internal employee payment? But what's the next step you would like to see to improve your business with Bitcoin?
I think Parker and I had like 3-hour conversation on this. I think that just the whole infrastructure behind this is like, as far as like, payment, getting baristas being paid in Bitcoin if they would like, a savings account. I mean, 401k. I mean, I think there's a lot. There's all the things are there, but they're just not easy to access. And I think that's really the next step. Is like I'm a curious person, so I keep like hearing about all these different parts and pieces that people are building. It's just that they're really hard to access. Or if you need a whole suite of things, you have to have 13 different accesses to all those different. Does that make sense? Like whether it be passwords or wallets or fees or whatever it is. And so it's like I think as we start to see those sort of become easier to access, that's what I would like to see. Anyways, is a lot of that. Because I feel like I see everybody doing those things, but it's just so scattered,
Disjointed.
disjointed. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna do one more question. Topher.
Lane, do you foresee yourself using Bitcoin to, I'm sure you have like a list of contractors and vendors that you work with. Do you foresee Bitcoin being useful to actually pay contractors and vendors that you work with?
Yeah. They just need to start accepting it. You know what I mean? But most of our vendors, especially for the farm, 75-year-old guy that runs the feed mill, he ain't touching Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Probably pay him in Lone Star before you can pay him in Bitcoin. Again, it's just a matter of people adopting it. Our biggest problem as a business is we need to sell more. So again, reducing barriers to making it easier for people to transact with us is great. Getting more people to use Bitcoin and getting vendors to accept Bitcoin would be great.
Maybe one idea is you've got a single farm that you buy cows from. We got to send some Bitcoiners out to orange pill that supplier, and then that'll open it up. But I think it's a good place to end, which is, my call to action is to support businesses that are leaning into Bitcoin, and that doesn't even mean that you have to pay in Bitcoin every time that you go. But one of the interesting things, we had Cole Bolton, who participated in a small business event here at the beginning of last year, so almost 2 years ago. And he said that 10% of his sales, and he's since sold his direct-to-consumer business, but 10% of his sales were in Bitcoin, but 35% of his sales were from people that he had met through the Bitcoin community. And that is like, do the math on that, less than 1 out of 3 people was actually paying in Bitcoin, but at that same time, it took him some time to get his sales up to 10% in Bitcoin. And so what you all can do is support these local businesses. Like if you need eggs, whether you find Shirt Tail at the farmer's market or go to local Pastures, it's super easy to do. But one of the things that Texas Slim has said, other than go shake your rancher's hand, is change your consumption model. Like you got to create a habit of actually going to local Pastures and making a plan once a week to stopping by. Or if you're going in, to a coffee shop, look up and see where the closest Medici is, and go there. Pay in Bitcoin if you like. Tell your friends, but support the local businesses, and whether it's Bitcoin or dollars, support the people that are supporting Bitcoin, because in my mind, it really is the only way out of inflation. Like, it's difficult to leg into it, but the cost of doing business, of prices constantly changing, is not a overnight change. It's one economic decision at a time, one business at a time, and each of you guys are consumers, and you have consumption habits. Changing them is not easy, but if you commit to it and you show up, then other businesses are going to see the benefit that these businesses are getting, and they're going to want to do something similar. So want to thank you guys for both being here. Really do appreciate your time, and also just leaning in. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.